So those of us who are old enough to remember Fortran and COBOL, that's where I first started. So this has been a journey for me, and it's really exciting to be here today to talk about the future as well. The bad news is, and I'm looking at some fellow Irishmen, 15 minutes to talk about 3 subjects, IoT, AI, and blockchain, is not enough. So we're locking the door. We're going to get some alcohol to come in and refresh everyone so that we can keep on going for several hours and we'll get through this. But on a serious note, on a really serious note, I think that where we are today is one of the most complex times in our industry's career. If you think about what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years, the ability to get technology at a speed or a rate of change has meant that instead of taking the foot off the gas to slow down and think about innovation, we're being forced to think about new ways of building business models, running our businesses, looking for trained and skilled staff that we've never thought we had to experience, deal with government regulation on privacy and the data that we have, and at the same time, keep the wheels of the company moving. So this is all part of this digital transformation, which has successfully sucked us all in and said to us, we have to do this. Well, the argument is, how are we going to do this in a calm manner, in a constructive manner? And I think using the 3 vectors of IoT, artificial intelligence, and blockchain, in the long run, will bring stability to our environments. And that's what I hope to do in the next 15 minutes, is give you the reasons why I think these 3 alone are possibly the most important things to happen. So when I think of the Internet of Things, I think of a lot of ways to describe something that we've all been looking at for some time now. How many of you think you understand the definition of IoT? Because there's probably 30 people in this room, and I'm sure there's 35 to 40 different definitions of what it means. But we're not here today to actually look at all the definitions. What I want to be able to do is to stand back and say, what happens if we take the IoT data and merge it with something else? Do things happen in the marketplace? Do things happen in our lifestyle? Do things happen in the way that we run our businesses? And when you do this, you start to see innovation. You start to see innovation at the intersection of IoT and AI. For example, when you create data and you apply training and learning to that, you're going to change the way you run your business. When you apply blockchain to Internet of Things, everyone starts to think, well, isn't it all about security, the biggest risk factor? And therefore, blockchain got off to a start by saying it's going to solve all our security issues. And I would say that's not the reason why we want blockchain. I think what we're looking at is this notion of being able to do things in a different manner. So one of the things that I've created, and I apologize if you've seen this, but this is me going off the deep end. As, quote, the first fellow at my prior company, I thought it was okay to have my own law. Shouldn't every fellow have their own law? So this is Turner's Law of IoT. And there'll be a test at the end of it to see if you remember it. The law is very straightforward. The value of your IoT data is proportional to 3 things. Number 1, the number of times your data is read. So let me ask you this. How many of you are wearing Fitbits or any kind of health monitor? About half of us. Right. Do you share that data with anybody? How many times? Once? Twice? I'm getting a nod for once. So the value of that data is only between you and whoever you share it with. Think about this. If you were to share that with multiple people, the insurance industry, for your health, if you're a competitive runner with your peers, which can be, by the way, backfired, because all of a sudden you realize people are looking at your training schedules every day and realizing how hard you're working or how hard they're working. The second thing is the speed of the data outcome. Think about this. If you're creating data And I disagree with this notion that data is like the new oil, Uli, because I've heard this several times. Data is not like fine wine or cheese. It doesn't get better with age. The data, if you're creating it, you should be using it right away. So the argument here is, what's the speed at which you use that data? Do you batch it up? Do you set it aside and then possibly transmit it over a network? And the last one is this notion of the distance of outcome. The distance of outcome. Are you going to use the business outcome right where the data was created? Or are you going to send it back to the enterprise and the corporate systems and do something with that data? And there's a subtle message in that. I'm trying not to introduce too many terms at the moment, but think about the edge of the network. Why all of a sudden is everyone talking about the edge of the network? It's because you want to be able to do something with that data. And that edge of the network, and this is why I asked the question at the beginning, what does IoT mean to you? The edge of the network is hard to define. Is it the edge of the enterprise? Is it the edge of the branch office? Is it on the factory floor? Is it on a ship? Is it on your wrist? Is it in the retail store? Where is that edge? And where do you want that business outcome? So at the end of the day, when you put all three of those together, you get a business value. But the important piece of this is what happens is as you go through these steps, you realize that you're not in this world alone. You actually do have an ecosystem of partners that are making it possible to you. Which is why on the bottom you see the value of the ecosystem increases the more times you read the data, the speed with which you read the data, and where you want to read that data, as does the business outcome. And you then map that back to the left-hand side, and in the middle, right there, is where the speed of innovation based on IoT, the value of your business outcomes goes through the roof. And that's where we're seeing the most disruption in the industry today. As an analyst, everybody has to have numbers, big numbers. And I thought that I should refer you back to the fact that by 2022, every minute, 55,000 new things get plugged into the corporate networks. Why is that important? Well, it's very simple. If you think about this between now and 2022 and just slightly beyond 22, if you're applying 55,000 new sensors, you at some point hit critical mass. At some point, there are so many sensors out there creating data, being connected to your corporate networks, that the value of this data has to be tested and tried. Now, 55,000 new sensors in 2022 also means that if you don't have a cloud infrastructure strategy, you better find a lot of people to run your data center or run your infrastructure because you can't scale. The second point is 55,000 sensors every minute is going to create a lot of content. So what are you going to do with that content? How are you going to manage that content? Be careful where that content sits. Is it in compliance? So all of a sudden you start to see this snowball effect of having so many sensors, whether they be for the healthcare, creating medical critical data, or whether it be in agriculture, creating data about weather and humidity and when to harvest. So the range, this is the other problem we have, the range of IoT data and use cases is so vast that we haven't seen this type of implementation before. So that's why I think where we've been recently is an iceberg. What we've done is we've talked about everything that's above the waterline here. We've talked about the infrastructure. We've talked about 5G as the way to enable IoT to be connected. We have all this technical jargon, and I apologize to some of my friends in the technology industry here. But I think we're talking about the wrong thing. Our customers are going to trust us that at some point we're going to figure out how to get connected, how to store that data, how to process that data. What I think we should be talking about are the changes in our business processes. We should be talking about the disruption in our business models. Let me give you an example. ERP has been out there for a long time, and also enterprise asset management. And traditionally, those are two stacks that haven't necessarily talked to each other in a seamless manner. They've talked to each other, and there's companies who work in both areas. But think about this. Once you connect an asset on a factory floor, and you start to apply some form of intelligence to that asset, then the whole idea of the enterprise resource planning process, how you make the asset, how you put it in the supply chain, and how you manage the asset itself starts to get blurred because your customer wants to have that end-to-end experience. The second one is when we make things today, in the channel we tend to make and sell a device or make and sell a product. In an ecosystem world where the customer is in the middle and they're gathering data about that product, we then go to a sense and respond arena. The customer is going to know what's going to happen, they're going to sense what's going to happen, and either they or the device itself will respond through its channel to you to either do some preventative maintenance, predictive maintenance, supply chain management, repair, guided repair. So all of a sudden now you've moved from this very linear process to a very circular process. In a recent study that we did at Ecosystem, we looked at IoT as the top line subject matter. And from a maturity standpoint, we asked the question, well, where are you on your understanding of AI and your understanding of blockchain? And it's interesting to see the chart here. If you think about it, looking at the colors from left to right, you'll see that the darker colors, these ones, they're the blockchain ones. And the AI ones are the ones on the right-hand side. And the way I read the chart is very straightforward. The bigger the bar on the right-hand side, the more mature the technology is. And you can see roughly here, and let me guide you through this. And by the way, these charts are available for you. Very straightforward. About 60% of all customers think they understand the benefit of AI. And only about 40% of customers think they understand what blockchain should be made for. And I would contend that's what we'd expect. And that's the good news. It's also showing the maturity of where we are in the industry. It's showing that the opportunity for blockchain hasn't quite hit that point of being in the critical mass or the critical understanding in the industry. The second thing is when we're looking for indicators of where we are with the technology. Here are about 2,600 startups in the last year or so. About $33 billion worth of money. And that's not bad at all in terms of startup investment. And what's interesting for artificial intelligence is about 1,000 out of those 2,600 companies are all doing machine learning or machine learning applications or processing around machine learning. That means we're thinking about adding intelligence to those devices. And then I'll challenge you again. Remember, where are those devices? Are they on the enterprise? Are they on the factory floor? Or are they at the edge of the network? And if at the edge of the network, and let me throw you a little quiz here. Those devices at the edge of the network or endpoints, say like CCTV, typically are just cameras. Now through things like machine learning applications, putting intelligence at the end of those, at the endpoints themselves, makes those devices much more valuable. And we're starting to see companies grow the end of the edge of the network stack. Very complicated, which means if you're the IT supplier, IT provider, now you need to be able to provide a lot more skills around these edges. So what the problem here is, we now have this ripple effect between adding intelligence to the data through IoT, that we start to see things like, as you can see, there's a wide range of devices, some small, some large, some dumb, some very intelligent, different form factors. As I said, cameras, cars, medical machines, MRIs, lathes and factory floors on your wrist in the retail store. But what it's calling for is this notion that we have to think about how we're building out the infrastructure. Is it going to be a central, typical IT model? Is it going to be decentralized? Or is it going to be distributed? And that's, I think, is this notion of what we do here with blockchain. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out how do we manage that data? What's the value of that data, and who and where and how has access to that data? And that's where I think the value of blockchain starts to come in. And later on this morning, we're going to have a couple of experts who will talk about both the value of AI and where AI plays, and blockchain itself. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to build out this chart. On the left-hand side of the chart, I'm talking about the key benefits of blockchain. It's not necessarily about fixing the security problem. It's about making you run your business in a different way that's much more efficient, that has reduced the friction between different parts of your organization. And that's probably a good point to stand back and say, when I say reduce the friction between different parts of your organization, as part of that digital transformation, we're going to flatten organizations. We're going to allow transparency to happen in the organization. In fact, we need to have that transparency because we want to share data or business outcomes across organizations. And take it one layer above. We're going to have to share or think about how we share data between our partners. And at some point, we're going to have a layer in there that is an exchange layer or a broker layer. And this is where I bring my financial services experience here into play. I do think we're going to have IoT outcomes being brokered across businesses in an exchange. I have something to offer on, say, on healthcare that I think somebody in the insurance industry wants to have a look at. So if I do that, I want to make sure that, say, the right person at the right time, the right place has access to that data. And that's where I think some of the value of blockchain comes in. And anything to do with the administration of that data. And that's why I say on the right-hand side here, we're looking at some key use cases for blockchain. Tracking the asset value. Where is it? Where in the world are my diamonds? Lower the transaction friction. How are we doing business? Is it easy to make sure that the right person is receiving the goods at the right time? Or the last one here is lower the compliance process. How much time does it make sure that we're staying in compliance with a particular good or a particular product? Are we in compliance of where that is in terms of, say, freshness, if it's vegetables? So there's a lot of opportunities here that are way beyond what we originally thought that IoT and blockchain would be used for. And just to show you that there are genuine examples of blockchain that you can go out and touch and kick the tires. Here's 50 of them across a wide range of industries. Now, technically, blockchain is a challenge for anybody who's in the IT infrastructure place. When you create a distributed ledger, think about the synchronization of that ledger. Think about the compute requirements that are needed for that. And in my humble opinion, when I think of blockchain and the compute capabilities, I don't think we have the right stack at the edge of the network. And it goes back to what I said before. What happens with IoT, with these devices that are getting more sophisticated at the edge of the network? You're building a distributed network and building distributed compute requirements. And we're not quite there yet to be able to run blockchain effectively at the edge of the network. So when I look for examples that are really good test cases, I look for examples of assets that are moving slowly. In this particular case, I want to draw your attention to the fact that there's one here on Maersk shipping. Ships move fairly slowly. They got a lot of containers. And you can track those devices pretty easily as opposed to, say, something in retail where you're trying to use IoT and blockchain to make sure that you have an authenticated transaction happen. So we're seeing some good test cases here in Maersk shipping, understanding where those containers are, understanding what the goods look like, and perhaps understanding the business processes by which it'll happen. There's other ones that are quite fun here. There's one over here on music, I think, if you can read it. So remember Napster and people stealing music rights from artists? Well, the guy from Guns N' Roses finally said, enough. I'm going to make sure that the artists get paid the right amount of money if you're going to look at their music. So you can see a diverse use case here. But we'll get into that later on this morning with our other speakers. So with that, I would just like to bring it all together on 3 simple ways of looking at IoT, blockchain, and artificial intelligence. IoT will be the fuel. It will fuel the business transformation, because I think that without IoT data, you can't have digital transformation. What are you going to transform? The second thing is that artificial intelligence will create and supply new business solutions, new business services. And as a result of that, remember I said you have to change yourself from being a make and sell organization to a sense and response and create new services. And last but not least, because you have the data, because you've created some intelligence and some outcomes, blockchain will create and supply and fuel this new role for business commerce. With that, I'd like to thank you very much.